This is episode 32 of the 99 Forever podcast. I'm Eric Friesen, and I'm pleased to be joined by Diego Pontes. Diego, welcome to the show.
Hello, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to finally talk to you. We've been planning to record an episode together for a couple weeks now, and I think we picked a great night to do it following a historic performance by Edmonton Oilers captain Connor McDavid yesterday. But before we get into that, I'd just like to find out a little bit about your hockey background. So tell me, when did you first get interested in hockey?
Oh, I got interested in hockey at first, when I traveled to Canada in 2011. So I was invited to go to a game. It was Oilers versus Predators, and on November 17th, if I'm not mistaken, and then that was my first time watching a game. I was watching at Rexall Place at that time. It was such a good environment. People were going crazy, cheering, supporting the Oilers. So I really liked that environment. I really like it, all the atmosphere, around the stadium, and people were very passionate about the Edmonton Oilers. So it really got my attention because when I went to Canada, I went as an exchange student, an exchange program. I took part here and I spent 1 year living in Edmonton, Canada. So I lived with a Canadian family. So this family took me to one of these games, and it was this game specifically, Oilers versus Predators, on November 17th. So I got so happy, to be doing something that I wasn't, used it to do, like going to games, even here in Brazil. Sometimes we don't do that, due to the lack of time. So I was very fortunate to watch one of these games. And from that moment on until the present days, I'm still Oilers fan, even living far from Canada, living in Brazil. I'm so glad to be part of this community, huge community.
Oh, that's awesome, man. I had no idea that you had actually lived in Canada before, and specifically Edmonton. Is there a reason why you picked Edmonton to go to school there? And how was your experience living in Canada overall?
Oh, my experience was great, actually. I went to Canada to work as a volunteer. There was a program here in Brazil for students to spend 1 year in Canada, work at some specific places. We were designed to some specific functions, and then one of the places available for me at that time was in Pennsylvania, in United States, and in Edmonton, Alberta. So I decided to go to a different place, So I didn't want to go to United States. I really want to visit Canada. And my experience was great. I had lots of opportunities to meet different people, to speak in English, to practice, because as a foreign student, we want to learn some English when we travel abroad. So that was my first goal, and I went there to study and to work. But I had such a great experience there. It was a great moment in my life, and it really changed my life for better. Since I came back to Brazil, so life has been pretty different than it used to be in the past, for better. Let's be clear about that.
Well, I'm glad to hear that things are going good for you, man.
Yeah.
How was it getting used to the change in weather, though? I'm guessing that was the first time you had ever seen snow.
Exactly. It was not an easy thing. I live in the northeast of Brazil, and in this region here in Brazil, it's kind of hot, so the weather is really warm. We don't have any kind of snow, we just have some cold weathers, but it's in the countryside of my state. We are surrounded by the ocean, so there are lots of beaches here, and I never had the chance to meet the snow before I went to Canada, So I really liked that experience. It was really good for me. It felt great, something new, a new weather, so something to experience. and I really like it. But I suffered a lot, it was
Yeah.
really.
No, you know what? I totally understand. I've lived here my whole life, and I think after you have lived in a cold climate for years and years, you get used to it, but maybe you don't necessarily love it as much. I mean, I've always enjoyed the winter just because it's hockey season. So I
Yeah.
mean, I can do without the minus 35 days, but if it's minus 10, I'll be at the outdoor rink or um enjoying being outside still. And uh, did you get a chance to skate at all when you were here, or even try to learn how to skate?
Yeah, such a traumatic experience for me. How come a guy like from Brazil could like hockey, but he doesn't even know how to stand up on skates? It was my case. I didn't know how to stand up. It was really difficult for me. There were some friends of mine who took me to like uh, there was a lane, a frozen lake,
Yeah.
and they said, "Okay, why don't you try to skate?" And I told them, but I had no idea. I have no idea how to skate there. So try to put on these skates and see if what you can do. Oh my
These
gosh.
these boots with knives on the bottom.
Oh, yeah, don't tell me about it, Eric. It was a fun experience, but I really enjoyed. And I just realized that playing hockey it's not something easy. You have to handle the stick, and you have also to skate really well. To my surprise, some friends of mine told me, "Oh, kids start skating here at 4 years old."
Yeah.
And I said, "What?
I
No, so
think
how can a kid do that?"
I don't think it's ever too late to learn, but obviously for any skill in life, I believe that starting at a young age is good. Like I started skating when I was 3 years old. And, for anyone who does any discipline like playing the piano, dancing, skating, these are things that obviously, if you start at a young age, I think you have a better chance of developing those skills and obviously being better at it as you get older. But it's not impossible. So
Absolutely.
I'm glad that you still gave it a try, even though you were only here for a short time.
Yeah, yeah. It was just one day. If I had more days practicing, maybe I would have skated better.
Well, maybe the next time you come back to Edmonton to see a game in the future, you can give it another shot. At one of the rinks when you're there.
For sure I will. It's gonna
But
be
no,
fun.
that's great to hear about your experience in Canada. Let's stick a little bit with the Oilers though. Now, you said that you went to your first game in November 2011. Do you remember anything about the game or who scored?
I do, like I said, it was Oilers versus Predators, but I was having a look here at some stats from that time. I
Right.
don't remember all the players. I took some pictures. I was so entertained. My biggest memories were buying a T-shirt. That was a Taylor Hall number on the back.
Oh yeah.
And I loved that shirt. I kept that shirt as long as it would last year. So the shirt was really in poor conditions after some years, so I had to throw this away. But I really love it. And I also got a bobblehead from Ryan Smith.
Oh
So
yeah.
I got as a souvenir, because when you enter the Rexall place, you the fans they receive a bobblehead. Well, at least at that time I was getting one. I don't know if someone paid for me. I don't remember that, but I got one for free.
I'm
And
guessing it
I
must have
took
been
it
a
back home.
promotional giveaway. That
Yeah,
Yeah, they do that
probably.
on certain nights, I'm sure. But yeah, Ryan Smith was my childhood hero, and watched him all the way until he retired in 2014. And Taylor Hall, when he was in Edmonton, was one of my favorite players too. Were those your favorite players as well in your first few years of following the Oilers, or who are your favorite Oilers players, and what do you specifically like about them?
Oh, okay. So my favorite Oilers nowadays, I really like Connor McDavid, of course. How could you not
Of
like the
course.
biggest player of not of all time, but it might be. one day, one of the biggest players of all time. But it's the biggest player to play the game nowadays. It's my hero. And also Leon Draisaitl. So I really like him. I like his shot, when he shoots, especially on power play. So I really expect a shoot from him like I expect a shoot from Alex Ovechkin. So
It's
these
similar.
are the biggest. They're similar. We know Alex Ovechkin. It's also a huge player, but I really like Leon Draisaitl. So for me, uh, him and Connor McDavid are my biggest, heroes nowadays. But in the past, I used it to be a huge Taylor Hall fan. I was, and I liked him. Uh, Nugent Hopkins was drafted in 2011, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I didn't know much about him, but I liked Jordan Eberle also, who used to play at that time. So these were my two biggest names in 2011, Eberle and Taylor Hall. I didn't know much about Ryan Smith, and I regret that because he was playing with the Oilers. And after some time, I realized he was such a huge name for the Oilers, one of the best players of all time, and well loved by the Oilers
Yes.
community.
Absolutely. I mean, Smith was closer to the end of his career by that point, but in his prime, he was, the Oilers' best player for probably a 5-year stretch there, and probably one of the greatest players to ever put on the Oilers jersey. Um, just I know you talked about the first game you went to in 2011. Do you have any other favorite memories of watching the Oilers that come to mind right away?
Wow, the playoffs, of course, the first round against the Sharks was such an awesome game. The overtime game from David Dehernay. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I'm sorry for
That's pretty
that.
close, Desharnais.
Dehernay, yeah. So such a great memory. It couldn't be different, Eric, because that goal made the whole stadium like go crazy. People were so tense, they were so nervous, and when that goal just got into the net, oh my gosh, you saw a different atmosphere at that time. It was a great memory, and I also loved the game where Drysdale had a hat trick against the Anaheim Ducks, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
It was game six.
It was
Is
game
that
6. Yeah,
right?
that's right.
Game
You got it.
six. Yeah, it was game six. One of the best games that I have ever seen, from the Oilers, as a newer fan, So these are my biggest memories, biggest games that I have ever watched, and I still carry these memories till the present day.
That's awesome, Diego. And after you returned to Brazil from Canada, did you make an effort to consistently watch Oilers games still? And was it difficult to find a way to watch these games?
It was really difficult. As soon as I got back from Canada to Brazil, so I had problems to follow the Oilers. So I used to access the NHL website, look for some Oilers news info, and I wasn't this close, to the Oilers. So and also other responsibilities took, just appeared at that time, so I couldn't follow the Oilers closely, and I spent almost 1 year and a half without some news from the Oilers. I didn't use to access Twitter at that time, so I wasn't a big fan of that social media, and it got me. Uh, it was complicated for me, to watch some games and to cope up with the news. to follow the news to catch up. But in 2000, at the end of 2014, 2015, I started to watch the Oilers again, and I noticed that the Oilers had drafted a generational player called Connor McDavid, and the whole fan base was so excited. So I tried to search for more information,
Right.
trying to follow the Oilers and see what is this guy, uh, why is this guy so good, and since that time, from the beginning of 2015 to the present day, I'm a huge Oilers fan. I try to follow all the news, follow the games. I try to access to watch here. We can't pay the NHL uh, games because for us here in Brazil, it would be pretty expensive. So we
Right.
try to find other ways to watch the games and, you know, get into the Oilers news, to catch up with some news from the Oilers.
Well, it's great to hear that there seems to be a growing fan base, maybe not even just for the Oilers, but hockey in general in Brazil. I was talking to Gabriel Candido, who was on a couple episodes ago, and he was telling me about, running the Oilers Brazil account and just interacting with other hockey fans from Brazil. How many other Brazilians do you know that follow the game of hockey?
Oh, I don't know much. I really didn't know anybody who used it to follow hockey. When I returned to Brazil, I felt like a lost guy, because here in Brazil, and probably Gabriel also told you, we have a huge tradition for some other sports like football, when I mean football, soccer,
Yes.
actually, and other non-traditional sports, but there have been a growth, and Brazilian fan bases like basketball. We used to watch some games on TV sometimes, but we don't used to watch lots of NHL games, and I was the only one. I was the only guy here who knew about hockey, wanted to talk about hockey, but there wasn't anybody to talk to me. So I had to use some social media. I started using the Facebook to watch some interviews about the Oilers, watch the highlights, and after that I looked for the team on Instagram. So, and after that I created a new account to use Twitter and see if I could get some information from the Oilers as well. And then I found Gabriel, and he was running an Oilers account, so we used to talk a lot. We used to exchange ideas. And there was one day he told me, "Why don't you cover some Oilers games? So I need some help, and you seem to know a lot about the Oilers, so you could give me a hand." But I don't do this much, He's the owner of this account, so he runs the account. So only when he's really busy, I used to cover some games,
Oh,
from
I
the
see.
Oilers Brazil account. Uh, but it was great to find him to talk about the Oilers, to exchange some ideas, and I felt like, oh my gosh, this could be a great moment, an opportunity to speak about a game that I really like. Since I came back to Brazil, Eric, I'm not the same guy, the guy who used to love football, who used to love soccer and watch games. I would rather exchange this for hockey. Hockey gets me much more excited nowadays than soccer.
You
And
know
you
what?
cannot expect that from a guy who lives in Brazil. It's pretty unusual.
Oh, absolutely. I have a friend from Australia, and he's also spent time growing up in the Philippines. And I've had him on the podcast multiple times before. He actually discovered hockey in 2011 as well. And this was a guy who loved basketball his whole life, and he still is a big basketball fan to this day. But just from talking to him, once he got interested in hockey, that just became his number one sport. And he has been the biggest Oilers fan ever since. So it's kind of cool to hear you tell your story because I thought it was somewhat similar to that over the past decade, you guys have just seen hockey become your number one focus when it comes to sports.
Exactly. Hockey is my number one sport nowadays. Oh, I wouldn't exchange this at all. Because since I learned the rules, the emotion, the fever that goes in the rink, the rivalries. Is that right? I'm
Yep.
sorry.
No, you got it.
Uh, uh, I really liked. I was really disappointed, to be honest with you, with how the soccer was being handled here in Brazil. So it got me really demotivated, and I was looking for something different. And
Yeah.
I'm thankfully hockey came into my life, and since hockey appeared in my life, I have been a huge fan, and it's my sport number one nowadays. So today I discovered that my hometown soccer team went to the finals
Oh,
and a
nice.
local championship here, but I wasn't this excited. I'm much more excited about the playoffs. To watch Connor McDavid, Nugent Hopkins, Nurse, and the whole team, play hopefully the Jets. Uh,
Absolutely. And you know what? I think that's a great time to transition into talking about the Oilers here. And we're going to break down their 4-game series against the Vancouver Canucks last week. It was Edmonton's first 4-game series all season. So let's start with Monday night's game in Vancouver, where the Oilers won 5-3 and officially clinched a playoff spot, as you were just alluding to, for the second straight year. It was also the first time the Oilers have qualified for the playoffs in consecutive seasons since 1999, 2000, and 2000, 2001. So 20 years. Diego, uh, even though the Oilers only led by a goal in the third period before Connor McDavid sealed it with an empty netter, it really felt like they were in control of this game right from the start, didn't it?
yeah, they were dominant from the beginning to the end of the game, So JP had a strong game. Barry, McDavid, and Cahoon also. Cahoon potted his seventh of the season,
Yep.
So the second line was excellent. McLeod was playing with some confidence, and I could notice that JP was shooting more, So he has been developing a shooter mentality, and he got 2 points that game, you know. I really liked his performance. I wasn't afraid of a bad outcome because I noticed the Oilers were playing really serious. They were playing with certain urgency, and I could notice that the team was in full control. The whole game. So Barry's goal was awesome, amazing. I took some notes here, and I noted that Barry's goal that game gave Edmonton uh, defeat, defenseman, defenseman,
Yeah.
30 goals. Second in NHL. This is amazing. Drysdale had 2 points that game, and the team was playing so well. I'm always happy when I see Jesse Puljujarvi shooting and scoring goals he deserves. What a story for that guy.
Oh, he's had such a good bounce back season. And it's like you said, that second line, I thought they looked really good together. And obviously that allowed Dave Tippett to load up his top line with Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, and Jesse Puljujarvi. And the trio combined for 8 points in the victory. And like you kind of said, I thought they were dangerous all night. Barry also chipped in with a goal, like you said, jumping in from the point. Now we obviously know that McDavid and Draisaitl have terrific chemistry. But I think McDavid and Puljujarvi are also starting to build some really good chemistry as well. Do you like the idea of having all three of them on the same line, or would you prefer to see McDavid and Draisaitl play on separate lines?
I would rather choose the second option. I'm not a huge fan of Drysdale and McDavid together. You know, it is an overpower line.
Yeah.
Uh, it is a great line, actually, really entertaining, but I'm not so confident with Ryan Nugent Hopkins as the second line center. He has been having great games lately, which is great. If he keeps up, we could have two strong lines. But I'm not so confident on him at this moment. I don't know if he has been playing well because he's playing for a new contract, probably. Uh, but he developed a great chemistry with Kahun and Yamamoto. So I dare to say, Eric, that I prefer Nugent Hopkins with Yamamoto than Drysdale with Yamamoto,
Yeah.
because I find more chemistry. I think they have the same pace of the game, and they really form a good match, and McDavid and Drysdale are meant for each other. So
Yeah.
if they could keep that, these two lines working well, I would say let's keep that way. But I think Drysdale as the second line center offers more balance to the team.
Yeah, I
So
mean, when you have two powerhouse players like McDavid and Draisaitl, it makes sense to have them on separate lines. But Nugent Hopkins has been in the league for 10 years. He's smart enough and skilled enough to play second line center. However, he has been on the wing more in the last couple of years. So he does have the ability to either go back and forth between center and wing. But personally, as much as I love watching McDavid and Draisaitl play together, it's just they should be centering their own lines when the playoffs start. You can put them together against Vancouver or against Ottawa and beat up on a weaker opponent because their defense just isn't good enough to contain them. But once you start to play better teams, you're giving your team such a better chance to have them playing separately. And look, they're still going to be able to feed off each other on the power play. But
yeah.
I just think if you want the Oilers to be harder to play against, you have to take these two superstars and have them on their own lines. And if the Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins, Yamamoto line can recapture the magic that they had last winter, then the Oilers are going to be a really difficult team to beat in the postseason because we know that whoever plays with McDavid is going to be fine. He can produce with anyone, but it's that second line that was so great last season, like we said, of Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins, Yamamoto. That can be the difference maker going into the postseason.
No doubt, and I do love the second line, this dry line, as some people used to say.
Yeah,
They were magical last year. They were so entertaining. Drysdale was taking over carrying the team on his back, while McDavid was absent, and it was really good. It really worked well. Nugent Hopkins was playing uh, great, and Yamamoto was also being like the master of forecheck. He's not afraid of going to the boards and forecheck some people. They
not at all.
were, yes, and he is such a small player, but he's like a ferocious dog. He's not afraid of anyone, and I like that. They were magical last year. It is exactly like you said. If they could recapture this magic, that would be such a treat, you know. And I have one unpopular opinion.
Okay.
About the first lines, I know that some people really like Kahun and McDavid plus Puliarvi. I say Puliarvi is a keeper on the right wing, but this left wing is still wide open. Kahun has
I
had
think
some
so, yeah.
great games, but I would say, Eric, why not to try McLeod on
Mm,
McDavid's wing, because he's too fast, and he could be the defensive conscious and leave Puliarvi more open to shoot and score more.
you make a good point. Like I will say, like McLeod does have the speed to play with a player like McDavid, and he would be able to be the defensive conscience. You're absolutely right about that. I just worry a little bit about throwing a player with less than 10 NHL games on his resume up on the top line and having to go up against the opposition's top defenders every night. I also think he's playing pretty well right where he is as the third line center.
Yeah.
And you look at a guy like Dominic Cahoon, you're right. It is wide open. I don't think that Dominic Cahoon is a permanent solution there on the left side with McDavid. But for right now, I think he's a decent stopgap because he's a player that doesn't need the puck. He can just get McDavid the puck. And I remember the first couple games that they were together, he would just get the puck to McDavid in full stride and let him take it from there. So it's not like they're going to be competing for who's going to carry it up the ice. He's fine to just get it to Connor and then get in an open spot in the offensive zone and be looking for the pass back. And he does have a great one-timer. He scored a beautiful one-timer goal in the game we're talking about here on last Monday night. So,
Yeah.
yeah, he's like I said, he has shown glimpses of his offensive upside, but it's just he hasn't delivered as much offense as you probably would have liked this year, I think.
Yeah, that absolutely. Yeah, Cajon is a great player. It's a decent player. He can play in different lines. He has played some games on third line and first line, second line most of the season. I like him. But I don't think he's the solution long term.
No.
He has had great games, but maybe next season, I don't know. I don't see him sticking with the Oilers.
I mean,
It's
we've got
kind
a guy like Dylan Holloway coming too, right? And it's going to be another situation where it's a young guy like McLeod, and maybe you don't want him up on the top line right away. But I think long term, that could be McDavid's left winger. And if you have Holloway on the left side and Puljujarvi on the right side, those are two big, fast, skilled wingers playing with Connor McDavid, and that could be a deadly first line for the rest of the league to try and deal with.
totally agree with you. I'm really hopeful for Dylan Holloway. I wasn't this much excited when the Oilers that drafted him. We were expecting other players. Cole
Yeah,
Perfetti and
those are the guys. I think some of the
some
guys who are
other
playing in the
players.
Canadian leagues, you're right. Like the
Yeah.
junior hockey players had been talked about more. And even I was a little bit surprised by the Holloway pick, but I think we've learned that we shouldn't doubt Ken Holland. He's a GM who's done some pretty good things at the draft in his career, and it looks like he might have hit another home run with the Holloway pick. So
Yeah.
just McDavid finished the night in Vancouver on Monday with 2 goals and 2 assists to raise his point total to 91 on the year. And by
Yeah.
doing so, he became the first player to record 90 points in 5 consecutive seasons since Alex Ovechkin from 2005 2006 to 2009 2010. And more impressively, McDavid joined Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux as the only players in NHL history to score at least 30 goals and 60 assists in 50 games. Diego, we're going to be talking about McDavid a lot tonight. Uh,
Yeah.
what can you say about the incredible season he's having?
He's a beast. He's the GOAT. Uh, there aren't other adjectives, than these ones. He's
We're
the
running out
best
after six
player.
years of things to say.
Yeah. Yeah, we're running out of ideas. I really don't know which words I should use to express how great that guy is and how blessed we are as Oilers fans. So after some years of darkness and really bad results, so disappointed fans, McDavid was such a blessing, in our lives. And it's like he's the second coming of Gretzky. And I'm so pleased to witness him playing, to be part of this moment as an Oilers fan, because some people used to speak about the past. They have some big nostalgia, and feelings about the 80s and the moment Gretzky, Messier, and other Oilers heroes were playing. And now, in 2021, we can witness McDavid do lots of magics on the ice. We can witness his breaking records in terms of points, assists, and goals. What a player.
Yeah.
Honestly, Eric, I have no words to describe him. I can just be thankful for McDavid to play for the Oilers, and I hope it lasts for his whole career, you know.
Absolutely. And look, I was born halfway through Wayne Gretzky's career, so I missed the first half and the most dominant half of his time and all of his time with the Oilers. So now getting to witness Connor McDavid's career right from the start in 2015, it's been such a blessing to see this generational talent on a
Yeah.
night-to-night basis. I've only missed one game of his career so far, and just every single night, I just have to remind myself that this is such a special time to be an Oilers fan and to never take it for granted, even if they win or
Yeah.
lose. Like you might always be a little disappointed after a loss, but just think like we have one of the greatest players of all time, and we're getting to witness him and watch him in his absolute prime. We're so lucky as Oilers fans. I mean, how many franchises in their history have had a player of this caliber? It's it's a lucky time, and I think the best days in Edmonton are still ahead of us.
Yes, definitely. Drysdale said something yesterday on his interview post game. He said something like this: the greatest years are ahead of us.
That's right, he did.
Yes, he said that, and it got me so excited because he's expecting a brighter future with the Oilers. He's pumped about his his friend Connor McDavid as well, and he's pumped about this team. So they're getting confidence. They're smiling more. I used to say that smiling is contagious. So Jesse Puljujärvi has made this team smile more and enjoy the game more, and that's how it should be. Every single game, show this passion, this heart, and show this excitement for playing the game, the game they are fortunate to play in this masked world. So we're still witnessing some records and magic. We're seeing lots of players excited to play the playoffs. We're seeing our biggest stars pumped about the next years, the upcoming years. So it is a great time to be an Oilers fan, to be alive, and to be part of this moment. I'm really amazed about what McDavid has done on the ice, and also the other players. I don't want to just talk about him, but I should also give some merit to Darnell Nurse, who has been playing lights out. So he has been having an incredible season. Um, Adam Larson, he's played his 660th game, yesterday, and has been playing like a real stud. So he's gonna be a tough guy to take down during the playoffs. And I'm so glad we're having a strong team and making McDavid feel more confident and excited about his team and his upcoming years, with these players. So I think we should celebrate, and we should really commemorate every single moment. An Oilers fan
Agreed.
or even a loss, we should be happy about having him, like you said.
Well, first of all, I love your positivity, and I couldn't agree more with you. Okay, let's jump up to the second game of back-to-backs now in Vancouver, and the Oilers got off to a little bit of a shaky start in this one, allowing a goal 34 seconds into the game. And it just seemed like they didn't have much energy through the first 35 minutes or so of this game, but all of a sudden they erupted for three quick goals late in the second period and basically took over the game from there. And even though the Oilers were trailing for over half the game and Demko had made some really good saves for the Canucks, the Oilers scored four unanswered goals to pick up a solid 4-1 road win. And Diego, I'll tell you, from watching this game, I just felt like they needed one lucky bounce to wake them up and get back in the game. How about you?
Yeah, so I had the same feeling, that first goal from Bezer, was a stink. 34 seconds in. But even still, the Oilers managed to outshot the Canucks on the first period. So uh, they weren't afraid of the result. They were battling, but of course they were struggling a lot. But on the second period, the Draisaitl scored two times, and Bouchard also scored a beautiful power play goal. There was a difference of 14-6 shots for the Oilers. So they really exploded on the second period. But I've always been confident about the Oilers, especially this team. They haven't, been affected by one goal, or to go after the game if they are losing. So they were battling to win,
Yeah, it
And
was.
I saw some no, I saw some lines working well. I saw the fourth line putting some pressure on Vancouver's zone. That was a great sign. The second line was having some chemistry again. So I was confident because all the lines were working. They were battling. They were really trying to generate chances for the Oilers.
Yeah,
And on the third period, Nurse scored a beautiful goal. We were outshot, by the Canucks, 17 shots against 6 for the Oilers. But Mike Smith went huge to win that game for us.
yeah, we got to give, a shout out to Mike Smith for how well he's played, not just this past week, but all season long. And, I also think that after securing a playoff spot the previous night, the Oilers might have taken their foot off the gas a little bit in the second game in Vancouver. But once Draisaitl scored those first two goals, it just looked like the Oilers, like it gave the Oilers life. And I think it also took the wind out of the Canucks sails a bit. And from there, they just cruised to another win. And like you said, Darnell Nurse scored his career high 16th goal of the season in the third period to put this
Yeah.
one away. So it was pretty elementary from there. I'd also like to get your thoughts on Evan Bouchard, who played in his first NHL game in more than 2 months on Tuesday. And look, it's not an ideal situation for your top prospect to go that long without playing. But
Yeah.
Bouchard looked like he hadn't missed any time at all, the way he stepped into the lineup and the way he was skating and moving the puck. He played over 20 minutes and obviously scored a power play goal just before the end of the second period. What did you think of Bouchard's play on Tuesday? And do you think he should have been in the AHL with the Bakersfield Condors all season?
No, I heard some rumors that he didn't want to go to the AHL, but I'm not sure about
He,
that,
yes, apparently it's been put out that Ken Holland asked him if he would rather be playing in the minors or if he would rather be on the taxi squad in Edmonton. And from strictly a financial perspective, you're going to be making more money sitting in the press box in Edmonton than you would playing in Bakersfield. As for his development, you'd probably like the guy to be playing as much as possible. But I
Yeah.
think people forget that he played all fall in Sweden before coming back to Edmonton to start the season in January. So he did actually get quite a bit of playing time in uh, up until December, I think, when he flew back to Canada. But yeah, it's not the best situation this year. They would have loved to have him playing in Bakersfield, but I think just with the 7-day quarantine, it made it so much harder to send players down and recall them.
Exactly, exactly. And Bouchard seems to be ready. He should be a keeper for the next season. There were some uh, chats about Barry not resigning with the Oilers because he's gonna ask for a lot of money. And I get that. I understand he's been really useful for us, but I'm afraid of him coming next year because it would, block Bouchard from stepping in to the team. And I really feel, Eric, that Bouchard is ready to play, to quarterback the power play, you
Yeah.
know. He has an awesome release. His shot is elite for me. I really liked his game. He didn't seem to be like rusty when he played this game. He got some power play time, a few seconds with McDavid. He also took part of the penalty kill. You know, uh, and he didn't act like he was playing pee wee hockey. He seemed like a pro. He was playing really
No, it's
confident, not afraid of go for the puck, shoot the puck. And I like players who are not afraid to shoot the puck. He doesn't seem to overthink when he has the puck,
yeah,
on
he's
his
so
stick.
calm under pressure. He might be the Oilers' most calm player, and I think that some people would even like to see a little more urgency in his game. But I just love the fact that he can deliver those potentially breakaway passes to McDavid at any moment. Just you see the way he's able to just give these 50, 60-foot passes to send a player in all alone or to create an odd man rush. And uh, like I was saying a little bit before about Bouchard, because of how important he is to the future of the organization, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have him sitting for that long. But I think it just came down to a numbers game this year. And as the youngest and least experienced right shot defender on the Oilers behind Tyson Barrie, Ethan Bear, and Adam Larson, Bouchard was either going to have to play his offhand or he wasn't going to play at all. And we know that Tippett likes to have an even number of righty or lefty blue liners. So really
Exactly.
the only time that Bouchard was consistently in the lineup was when Ethan Bear got a concussion back in, I think, late January. So that's when Bouchard came in and was played about 10 to 12 games before he went back in the press box again. But that being said, I fully expect him to be a permanent roster player next season, and I don't know what that means for Tyson Barrie. There might be interest on the Oilers side or Barrie's side to sign another contract. I just think like you have this sure thing in Barrie, and although he might, leave something to be desired defensively, the offense he's putting up this year is the best we've seen from an Oilers defenseman in a long time. So to just let that walk out the door, if he's willing to come back on a reasonable contract, I think it's something you still have to consider, even though Bouchard will eventually step into being that top power play quarterback who's playing with McDavid and Draisaitl and creating all that offense on the power play.
Exactly. Tyson Berry has 46 points this season in a
Yeah,
56 game season. That is a lot, you know. And he also has a plus minus that is positive as well, So these are good things. 4 power play goals, 22 power play points. So he's huge for this special team.
and that's what he
So
was brought in to do. He wasn't brought in to be a defensive stalwart. He was brought in to rack up a ton of points with McDavid and Draisaitl with the man advantage, and that's exactly what he's done. The Oilers' power play is the best in the league right now. It was the best last season as well, but with Oscar Klefbom out for the season, Barry has come in and filled that role on the power play just perfectly.
yeah, you can't complain about him. I know some people, like you said, they really hate the fact Barry's not as good defensively as he is offensively. But it is okay for me. He's contributing a lot and he's making this team better. It feels great, Eric, to have the best power play 2 seasons in a row, And also, another important fact is the penalty kill team. It has been the first in NHL since March. I don't
Yeah,
know specifically the day,
they've
but
they've really bounced up because I think the power play or the penalty kill, I should say, was somewhere around 18th or 19th in the league at about the midway mark. And since then, it's climbed up. I believe it's 11th now overall, 10th or 11th. So, but like you said, the way that it's been performing lately, that is the big reason why it's had that massive jump.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not mad at Tyson Berry coming back for the Oilers, but I really think about even Bouchard, and for me, he's ready. He should be a permanent player on this roster. I like him, and I think if we should pay some money, we should pay for a winger to play with McDavid. Some wingers, maybe a turn right center. I don't know if McLeod will still be this third line center guy. Hopefully he becomes this guy, so we don't need to trade
I'm sure
to
Ken
look for
Holland
one.
has that. Yeah, like I think that's going to be one of his top priorities in the offseason is to try and find a top six winger who could potentially play with McDavid. Like I said, they still do have Holloway coming, but Ken Holland isn't the type of GM who likes to bank on a young player. He would prefer them to steal a spot than to just pencil them in that, okay, from training camp on, this is going to be where you're going to play. He wants them to come in and take that job, not be given a job. And just to
Yeah.
finish up on that game against the Canucks, I wanted to quickly get your thoughts on Kyler Yamamoto. You know, he had a few good chances to score in that game, but just couldn't find the back of the net. And look, Yamamoto was almost a point per game player in a 27 game sample size last season, so we know
Yeah,
he has the ability to produce offense. But
yeah.
he just hasn't had a lot of puck luck this year. Do you think it might just take one goal for him to get on a hot streak and start finding the back of the net more consistently?
He needs to take this monkey off his back.
Yes.
He's been an unlucky guy, and I'm cheering for him because he creates lots of chances. He battles for the puck, you know. So he has been in a slump recently, but he's not playing poorly. So he's a guy who, like you said, he can bounce back. Once he gets one goal, it doesn't have to be the prettiest one. It can be a really ugly goal.
Just
I
needs it to
think,
go in.
yeah, he needs that to get his confidence back. And I believe he might score one goal before the playoffs. It's just a matter of time because he has been working for the puck. He has been battling for the puck, and he
Yeah.
had a strong game. This last week. The first game that gave the Oilers the playoffs, clinched the Oilers. He played well, in my
And I mean,
opinion.
he's still only 22, right? So he's not a
Yeah,
final product. But this player is still going to get better. And even when he's not producing points, I think he's a very solid defensive player and he's a good penalty killer. So I just think he surprises a lot of people as well with how physical he is, despite being the smallest player in the ice. And as soon as he starts contributing more offensively, he's going to be a very useful player for the Oilers. He already is useful, but he'll just be even better. And I think that he still has the upside of being a offensive minded winger who can play in the top six. Let's now move on to Thursday's game back at Rogers Place in Edmonton, and Diego. This one got ugly very early as Mikko
yeah,
Koskinen. Mikko Koskinen allowed 4 goals on the first 4 shots he faced before being pulled, and the Canucks went on to win 6-3. Koskinen was also the first NHL goalie since 1989 to allow 4 goals on 4 shots. Look, I was impressed that the Oilers scored 2 late goals in the first period to at least cut the deficit to 2. But ultimately, I think the Oilers just dug themselves too deep of a hole to climb out of, didn't they?
yeah, exactly. They did. That was not a good record to keep it. So probably Koskinen is still having nightmares about that game. That was a disaster from the very beginning. We weren't expecting that,
No.
and it was really hard hard to climb back and get the points. For me, the fate of the game was decided after those four goals. In the beginning of the game. Koskinen is a solid goalie. He has been a decent backup goalie, despite what some fans think. They used to criticize a lot his performance. I'm one of them. I was one of them, but I had to cool down, and realize that he has been really decent. So when he doesn't play lots of games, he has some time to rest. He plays solid games, and that night was not one of his nights. He was really unlucky. David Tippett said after the game that two of these first four goals were Koskinen's fault. And the other two goals were the defense's fault. So Kulikov made a mistake. That led to one of these four goals. And but I think Koskinen can be much better than he is. He
Yeah.
will not forget that night. He will probably uh, next time he step in the ice on the ice, he will be very pissed, and he would like to prove people wrong. But that was really bad. It hurt, and it was difficult to get the victory after those first four games. But I
Right.
really liked that there was an effort from Draisaitl and Jesse Puljujärvi again scoring another goal, his career high. You know, it feels good to see he has a great release. And he put himself in position to shoot the puck. So he has been playing with such more confidence, Eric. So I'm so glad to see him performing well, despite the outcome of the game. So he has been playing really strong. And that night I could notice this too, you know. And Draisaitl again posting two goals. Who would expect that?
Yeah, it was a great pass by Connor out of the corner to set up Jesse for that one timer, and he rang it post and in, perfect shot. And I thought you also brought up a really good point about Koskinen, in that since he has started to get more rest with Mike Smith coming back into the lineup, that his performances have been better as of late. And if you look at it, in his last 11 games, he's won 7 of those games.
Mhm.
Obviously prior to Thursday night's collapse, but just I think he's better suited as a backup. And when he doesn't have to be the guy you rely on night after night, you get more consistent, stronger performances from him. So I think he's perfectly suited where he is. I mean, you don't obviously want to have a $4.5 million backup, but
Mhm.
it, look, when you have a goalie like Mike Smith who's making 1.5 million and giving you the type of stellar goaltending he has, it all kind of evens out a little bit. So it's been a big bonus ever since Smith came back. But no, Koskinen has definitely held his own in the smaller sample size that he's played. Um, I wanted
No
to
doubt.
yeah. And I just think, the Oilers hadn't had a real letdown in a while. So they were bound to have an off night eventually. And I would really rather get a loss like that out of the way before the playoffs. But at the end
Yeah.
of the day, Diego, I mean, it was a meaningless game in the standings. The Oilers are locked into second place in the North Division, and they're just waiting to see who they're going to be playing in the first round of the playoffs. But that being said, you never want to lose to one of your biggest rivals.
No, no way. They were very unlucky with these first four goals, but the fact they were already locked, for the postseason made me feel comfortable about this loss. I was really hoping for McDavid to get as many points as he could.
And
So and
that was
he
the
got
most
three
important thing.
points.
Yeah. And he could have had 4. Like, he had a penalty shot that he didn't score on, but like you said, yeah, just McDavid getting the 3 assists to increase his totals to 96 points in 52 games. That was the most important thing from that game, from my perspective, anyway.
Yes, I had the same opinion, so I was really excited for him. And I knew this day would come, but I was not expecting that would be this Saturday, so he had 4 points. Wow.
You know what? You're foreshadowing and leading us right into the fourth and final game against the Canucks on Hockey Night in Canada. And after a disappointing loss on Thursday, the Oilers responded with a big 4-3 win at Rogers Place. Additionally, three Oilers players reached milestones in that game, and we'll start with the biggest one, as we just mentioned a couple moments ago. Connor McDavid came into this game 4 points away from the century mark, and although it's almost impossible to predict a 4 point night from anyone, the best players always seem to rise to the occasion, and that's exactly what McDavid did, registering his seventh 4 point game of the season, 19th of his career, to reach 100 points in just 53 games, and also making him the fourth fastest player in the last 3 decades to reach the milestone. Diego, did you think McDavid was going to hit 100 points last night? And is this one of the best moments you've experienced as a hockey fan?
Definitely, Eric. Definitely. I was not expecting him to reach 100 points. You told me something that he would. He might reach this 100 points mark this Saturday. But I
Yep.
wasn't so confident about that. I was expecting a more difficult game. Because the Vancouver had a win, so they would come out stronger. Hungrier. So I was not expecting an easy game for McDavid, and it was not an easy game, but he's a superstar. He's the best in the world. So he rose up for the occasion, and he showed he is such a dominant player. I was amazed. For me, it's one game to keep on the books.
Yeah. I mean, McDavid has achieved so much individual success in his young career. He's won awards. He's going to win a bunch more this year. He's had tons of milestones and even a few NHL records. But I think this is his greatest accomplishment to date.
Yeah.
And the fact that he scored 45 seconds into the game, just getting that first point out of the way early, that's when I felt really confident that 100 points was happening tonight. And then of course he added 3 assists in the second period to cap off the historic night. Diego, in the 20 plus years I've been following this team, there's a handful of games that I can remember vividly. And I'm sure that this is going to be one of those games that not only myself, but many Oilers fans will never forget. When you think of the games that come to mind immediately, like you talked about the Draisaitl hat trick game in the playoffs, Desharnais' overtime winner, do you think this will be one of those games where McDavid got 100 points in 53 games that you'll be able to remember years from now?
No doubt. I will always remember that game. It is an amazing record. So, which other player would score 100 points in 53 games, in a 56 game season? So, how could you not get excited about that? I will always remember about this game. It was one game to get really excited because it was a game that had lots of milestones. So Draisaitl 500 point game. Our German Gretzky, like the
Yeah.
broadcaster said, and I totally agree with him. McDavid scoring 4 points to reach 100. JP also scoring again. So it was great to see McDavid, Draisaitl hugging each other. After Draisaitl score 500 points and McDavid scores 100 points. Adam Larson also having 600 games, and playing for the Oilers very strong, like I said. It is a game to keep on the books, and I will never forget that moment. I'm
Right. And
I'm hoping for best games during the playoffs, but for now, this is one of the games that I will always remember.
That's
It
right.
was such a fantastic performance.
The fun stuff is just around the corner with playoffs coming in a couple weeks. But it's like Dave Tippett said after the game in his presser last night that what McDavid has done now with that performance is establish himself as one of the greatest players to ever play the game. And
Yeah,
I think most people had felt that he would become that ilk of a player at some point in his career, that he would be, he would go down as one of the greatest players of all time. And even though we're only 6 years into his NHL career, I think that we can start saying that about the guy now. Just the things that he's been able to accomplish in such a short amount of time. It's truly remarkable. I mean, you just look, he has 68 assists this year. The third leading scorer in the NHL has 67 points. So even if Connor didn't have a single goal, he would be second in league scoring behind Draisaitl right now. But the fact that he's
yes.
also second in the league in goals with 32 just shows you what a dominant offensive force he is.
He's a monstrous. He's having a monstrous season. It is amazing too. I really would like him to reach Auston Matthews and take the Rocket Richard trophy from him, because I don't like the Leafs. I really don't.
Me neither.
Uh, but I have to confess, Matthews is also having a great season. Good for him, actually. But I would rather see Connor McDavid take them all, like take all the trophies, because he has to be, and he's going to be hopefully the Art Ross and Hart winner, and it would be something really special if he could get the Rocket Richard. It's not gonna happen, but it would be just one more statement of how great this player is. He doesn't have to prove nothing at this moment. He
Yeah.
has been dominant in every single aspect of the game. And like you said, can you imagine a player without any goals still be leading the league in points? That is amazing. It's out of this world, Eric. So I'm so glad to be part of this moment. It's like watching Pelé, but
Yes.
Pelé wearing skates. So I'm very fortunate.
No, that's great, man. And also, I mean, if you another notable thing that really stood out from that game is that McDavid, by reaching 100 points, became only the eighth player in NHL history with at least four 100-point seasons before turning 25 years old. He's in such an elite class right now. And the fact that he had 97 points last year due to an injury and a pandemic shortened season, he really should have five 100-point seasons by now. It's just mind boggling the numbers he's putting up. And also, he's about to become just the third player in NHL history, along with the great Gordie Howe and Wayne Gretzky, to
Mhm.
become only the third player to ever win three scoring titles at the age of 24 and under. So it's just everything he's doing right now is just incredible. This is a season for the ages. He's having the best individual season of any player in the last quarter century. And we're going to remember this season for a long time. Probably as long as we're watching the game, we'll be thinking about this incredible campaign that Connor McDavid had in 2020-21.
Definitely. And I'm really hopeful for the playoffs. If they keep this level of play, if he keeps this level of play, so greater things will come, in our way. So we can have great surprises. And I'm really hoping for a very strong performance from him and from the whole team this playoffs. You know, some people do not bet on the Oilers to go in a long run, but anything can happen during the playoffs. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. As long as you have a hot goalie and when you have the best player in the world like McDavid, anything can happen. So with Mike Smith and Connor McDavid, I just think that right now the Oilers are poised to at least win one round in the playoffs. And when it comes to the Leafs, I think they're a pretty evenly matched team. The Toronto Maple Leafs are a little better right now, but like I said, it's all going to come down to goaltending and special teams. And if the Oilers win those battles, then they're going to win the series. Just a couple other things before we call it a night. You mentioned this earlier. Leon Draisaitl picking up his 500th career NHL point, the first German player to ever reach the milestone. It's very rare that when a player gets his 500th point, that it isn't the biggest story of the night. But when you have a player like McDavid getting 100 points in 53 games, it's not the lead story. Still, what a remarkable accomplishment. What can you say about not just the season Draisaitl's had, but the career he's had to reach 500 points in just under 7 years?
I'm so glad that some journalists they had to eat their crawls, you know, because yeah. So some people were saying bad things about the dry saddle pick, you know, and he proved everyone wrong, you know, from that draft class. He has been the best player, hands down, you know.
Definitely.
So who is Sam Bennett, Eric? No, Sam Bennett is having a better having a better season with the Panthers, but he will never be Leon Draisaitl.
No.
You know, he is our German Gretzky. This player has grown a lot. You know, he has developed lots of things in his game. He's shooting, you know, his defensive game. He has been on a run. Probably he's not going to win, but it's good to mention that he's 30 and plus minus, you know, 14 power play goals. And in short-handed goals, he has scored one. So he's having a much better defensive uh, season. You know, some people were saying some things about his defensive game
Yeah.
that was not this good, and he's proving once again that people are wrong. You know,
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows what a great offensive talent he is. I mean, he's the defending, or I shouldn't say defending, the reigning Art Ross Trophy winner, Hart Trophy winner, Ted Lindsay Award winner. He had 110 points last season. No one else even hit 100. But he's also turned into a very dependable defensive performer. And when you can have a guy like that who is as big and strong and fast and skilled as he is, he's just this incredible talent that on most teams he'd be the franchise player, but when you play on the same team as Connor McDavid, you're the number two guy. And still to have that kind of a duo leading the way in Edmonton, they're set up for success for many years down the road just because they have these elite franchise players. And if they can surround them with the necessary talent, then it's going to be an exciting decade of hockey ahead of us, my friend.
no doubt, and I do believe he has lots of more things to offer in his game. You know, Draisaitl has been uh, such a such an important player for this team, you know. And I don't know if you think the same, but Jesse Puljujarvi could be taking the same path, you know, in terms of evolving and developing the game as Draisaitl, because Draisaitl also went down to the
Yep.
AHL, right? To
Yep.
have some time there, to have a stint there. And when he returned very strong, you know, improving his game. And we could notice this in JP. You know, after he returned to the Oilers, he's been evolving, developing his game, his confidence, and we could expect also greater things from him too, you know.
I
So,
see what you're
but
saying there.
yeah,
They both are a couple high draft picks. Draisaitl was picked third overall in 2014. Puljujarvi was picked fourth overall in 2016. They are both big body guys. They got the good one timer. Good skaters as well. In terms of expecting Jesse to be as dominant of a player of Draisaitl, I think is unfair. So I don't know if you're trying to make that comparison. But if you're in terms of just becoming a solid top six, potentially even top line winger who's capable of scoring 25 goals, maybe even putting up 70 points down the road. These are things that I think Jesse could do, but Draisaitl, I believe, is just such a special talent, one of the best players in
Yeah.
the world. I don't think Jesse's ever going to get to that level, but one thing I think we can all agree on is that the the perspective on this player has changed so much from where it was a year ago when he was back in Finland. He's come back to Edmonton and looks like a completely different player than we saw the first time around.
Yeah, exactly. No, I was not trying to make this comparison.
Oh, I didn't think you were.
Comparison. I was just saying that it is good to see that Leon took some path. He had to
Right.
come back to go down to come back stronger. So
That's the
and
right
I
comparison.
couldn't.
I agree.
Yeah, and I couldn't notice something similar to Jesse. Maybe he will be an impactful player for the Oilers, and we hope for that. But he's not gonna be at the same league,
Well, it's hard for
as
anyone to get to the level Draisaitl's at. Very few
yeah,
players reach where he's at. But you look at Jesse Puljujarvi, he's scored 15 goals in his last 41 games, which projects to a 30-goal pace over a full season. I'm not saying that Puljujarvi is going to score 30 goals next year, but I think we can reasonably expect that he should be in the 20 to 25 range, especially if he's playing with McDavid on a consistent basis.
hmm absolutely, and I, like I said, he has a great release. He has a good stick handling, and also has a good defensive game. He can steal some pucks. He can make some plays. I'm really liking, digging this kind of game he's having this season. But yeah, to compare him with Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid, it's unfair. And I don't know if it's reasonable to say that we should compare Connor McDavid with Leon Draisaitl because
Well,
I think Connor belongs to its own league.
no, I agree with you, but you know what? I will give Draisaitl credit. He was the best player on the Oilers last season. Now, maybe McDavid coming back from a potentially career-altering injury and rehabbing that in the summer might have affected his ability to get to 100% last season. But nonetheless, Draisaitl was the top player on the Oilers and deserved to be the MVP of the league last year. And the fact that Connor, even after a summer of rehabbing his knee, was able to finish second in league scoring shows still how dominant he is, even when he's not at 100%.
Exactly. McDavid is such a magician when he has the puck. He can do things that we would never expect. Even if he's not 100%. That's what you call a talented player. He can make plays from nowhere. Become something, become some grade A chances for the team. Become some goals. It's really good to have this kind of player who can turn the change the game, in a few seconds, like Connor McDavid, and having him with Leon Draisaitl, who is another elite player. It's also a gift. It's too much that we
Yeah.
we could have ever asked for.
And the fact that they're just starting to bring in more of these young players now to surround them with it, it's really exciting. So the last thing I wanted to touch on before we call it a night, you had mentioned this a little bit earlier. It was the third and final milestone of the Saturday night's game, and that was Adam Larson getting to 600 career games. He doesn't make as many headlines. He's not a guy who's going to rack up a ton of points, but he plays a very important role on the back end. I just wanted to get a thought from you on what you like about Adam Larson's game overall and an achievement of playing 600 games in the league.
Oh, so good for him to achieve this milestone. 600 games for an NHLer nowadays. It's a big accomplishment. So I give him that. He has been a solid defender. He's been having a very strong season. No, he only has 9 points this season, but this is not what is the most important stat about him. It's the fact that he has been an excellent penalty killer, a mean defender, and he's going to be a huge piece for us during the playoffs, Part of the success this team had in 2016-17 season was because of the defensive game, and Adam Larson was playing really well at that time, and he seems to repeat his performance from a few years ago this season, So I'm really glad for him, and I'm I'm not against a new contract for him. Like, we would like a reasonable contract, not an overpay. But I'm totally in favor, to have him. I'm sorry, next season. I really like his game.
Well, I think he's such an important piece because if you look at who the Oilers' right shot defenseman would be if they let him go, and let's say they just inserted Bouchard into that spot, you've got Tyson Barrie, who is a offensive minded defenseman. You've got Evan Bouchard, who does have some defensive ability but is more offensively inclined. And then you've got a guy like Ethan Bear, who moves the puck really well but isn't really big. You would be missing that physical, intense, vicious presence on the back end. And to have a guy like Larson who clears the crease and, you know, gives the goaltender room to see the puck, and just a guy who finishes checks and is hard to play against, that is what you need. You can't just have the same type of player throughout the lineup. To build a team, you need to have a bunch of different components. And he brings something that the Oilers need on the back end. Darnell Nurse brings some of that physicality and intensity
Yeah.
too. But if they're not playing on the same unit, and Darnell Nurse now obviously has taken a big step offensively in his game, but just to have a guy like Larson who is strictly focused on, taking care of his own end and the defensive side of the puck, that's something that the Oilers shouldn't let walk out the door. And it sounds like they are working on a 4-year extension, so I would be happy with him coming back. And right now he's going to turn 29, I believe, this fall.
Yes.
So,
29. Yeah.
you know, he's at an age for a defenseman where, he's at the peak of his abilities and at his strength, and I'm totally fine with a 4-year contract.
So am I. I think he's the exact type of defenseman we need. A shut down defenseman. You
Right.
know, and he's doing exactly what we were hoping. From him. Shut down plays. Clean the crease, like you said. Him and other Darnell Nurse, they have been strong, in terms of physical play, you know. And it's really good to have these kind of players, because if you look at other teams, such as Montreal, they have two important defensive players. They're very strong, like big studs. So I think the Oilers also need these kind of defensemen.
And when you get to the playoffs, you'll be really glad that you have a guy like Larson on the back end.
Yeah, so I think we shouldn't let him walk. And Kulikov has been a good addition for the team. Having a shutdown pair is a great strategy from Tippett, in my opinion. So two strong and big guys to rely on when things get meaner and more difficult, especially during the postseason. So I really like him, and it's one of my favorite players too on this team.
Well, Diego, I appreciate your analysis there, and it's been great talking to you tonight. You've been a fun guest to have on the show. Where can people follow you on Twitter?
So you can find me if you type Diego Pontes or Diego Barros. My Twitter is Diego underline PR Barros. So you can find me there.
So that's Barros.
PR. I'm sorry, I'm gonna say it again. So Diego underline
Yeah,
PR Barros.
got it.
Like
And
Barros
we'll also
with
make sure to
B.
tag you in the tweet when we post this on Twitter so everyone can find you. Once again, Diego, thanks so much for being on the show, and I hope you'll be back sometime.
Oh, my pleasure, Eric. Thank you for having me.
All right. So for Diego Pontes, I'm Eric Friesen. This has been the 99 Forever podcast. We're out.
just like